Seafloor spreading is observed in the southern Indian Ocean near Antarctica, between Antarctica and Australia. And this is sort of a microcosm of what happened during the Noah's flood. Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
Your co-host Rich Gear here as well, and this is fascinating, Doug. You sent me this article today, and or this little about this, and this is kind of interesting that that some of the science we see in the present seems to corroborate or confirm some of the things that might have happened during the flood of Noah. So you want to talk about that, Doug?
Yes, this is in April 2024 when the scientists observed the seafloor split wide open. And earlier that year, in February, a marine geophysicist, Jean-Yves Royer of the French National Center of Scientific Research, deployed the observatory with Hydro-Acoustics and Geodesy near Amsterdam Island on the southeast Indian Ridge between Australia and Antarctica. Now, this area is part of the French Southern and Antarctic Islands, and it includes the Kerguelen Islands, MacDonald and Heard Islands. And if you really want to get away from it all, this is the place to go. And it's a pretty inhospitable environment down there because it's pretty much a few volcanoes covered with ice. But the sea.
Nobody lives there then, right?
Well, there are actually a couple of little settlements, one on the Amsterdam Island and a couple on Kerguelen Islands. But I think they're just simply research stations.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm kind of interested that the French are actually doing some stuff down there because this is a very remote part of the world, and it would be really costly to have an expedition that went down there and to maintain a base of people that do research down in those islands is kind of a costly endeavor that I think.
Say, imagine the expense just getting supplies in there,
Yeah.
just living things, yeah.
I imagine that they only get a ship coming in once every month or so. Sort of like Pitcairn Island out in the
I was gonna mention that, yeah, yeah.
or Tahiti. By the way, my grandson, when they're going on their honeymoon, they're going to Tahiti and Bora Bora and Moorea in the South Pacific. So those lucky dudes.
Really? Huh? What?
My Cookie's grandson is getting
Oh,
married,
the cookie side. Okay, all right. Yeah, I was just saying. Okay, all right. Yeah.
and so we're having that wedding coming up. But anyway, they found out that you have seafloor spreading is it's not a slow gradual creep. It's instead tectonic tension uh, builds over decades before being unleashed in rare, violent bursts.
Okay.
Discrete episodes that the researchers called quantum events. And the team built an observatory consisting of 5 autonomous hydrophones positioned to monitor the entire Saint Paul and Amsterdam volcanic plateau.
Doug, what is a hydrophone?
A hydrophone is sort of like a sonobuoy. It's a
Okay.
it's a sonar. It picks up the
Okay. All right.
sound waves. So
I gotcha.
and they were hoping to catch one of the cataclysmic events. And the event in April observed that the ridge axis failed, let the accumulated magma underneath propagate in the oceanic crust. Vast sheet-like intrusions of magma, known as dikes, tore through the crust in less than 2 hours. injecting an estimated 150 million cubic meters of magma into the crust. As the dikes spread, they triggered earthquakes, reenacted long dormant faults, and fractures where the blocks of the Earth's crust can suddenly slip past one another and drain the magma reservoir between the ridge. And as a result, the seafloor collapsed very rapidly. At its peak, the ridge was pulling apart at 5 centimeters every minute, nearly 500,000 times faster than the long-term average. So
Okay, wow.
this whole thing about continental creep over millions of years is sort of shattered by this little quantum event that caused the seafloor to collapse very rapidly. And the findings of this was published in Nature. Here you can see the Google Earth. You have Australia over here on the right. Over to the left is Madagascar and
Okay.
Mauritius. The whole Indian Ocean is here. Up to the north is India. And down the bottom here is the Kerguelen Island. Below that is Heard and MacDonald Islands down here. So this area is really very, very, very remote. And then if we go in closer here, we'll see if we can find uh, Amsterdam Island, and here it is. And as you can see, there's a little town there called uh, Martin de Vives. And so we can zoom in and see there is indeed a tiny settlement there on the north part of that island. And there's a few houses and there's a hospital there.
Wow.
Well, can you imagine setting out to live in a spot like that? And
No.
that really makes it look kind of strange. So the ridge that they're talking about here is up towards the right. I think part of it's here. Let me see, right along this area. You can see that the whole ridge here is splitting uh, from the bottom, and then this whole line of there's a fault that goes up here, and then this fault here has the Maldives in it, and the British Indian. This is where Diego Garcia is over here. So as you can see, there are a whole bunch of ridges in the Indian Ocean that traditional plate tectonics model had over millions of years. India broke off as part of a plate, and it bumped up against Asia and created the Himalaya mountains. But in the models that we are talking about, the biblical account of Noah, in Genesis 7:11, it says that in the 600th year of Noah's life, the second month, the 17th day of the month, to see how specific it was, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Perhaps this April event is sort of like a microcosm of what happened on a macro scale during the flood of Noah.
Doug, that reminds me, it's like we think about, and it's a separate thing, but volcanism, we look at actually Mount St. Helens, even Krakatoa last, 1800s. But compared to some of the volcanism that must have been going on during the flood of Noah, these are like, it's kind of like microcosms of what happened back during the time of the flood as far as volcanism as well. I know I'm kind of maybe a little stretched there, but it just seemed when you put that these little this spreading of the seafloor, it's like what is the magma builds up under these ridges and then they break apart or something. I'm not quite clear on that.
Yeah, and we actually have a couple of different creationist models that try to explain this. And so we have catastrophic plate tectonics, which is the traditional plate tectonics that the is mostly propagated by most institutions over millions of years. But the catastrophic plate tectonics says that this uh, happened catastrophically over just a period of the timeline of the flood, 150 days, I think it was.
Yeah,
Uh,
150 days too. It was the actual, well, the waters were increasing on the earth for 150 days. So, Doug, and then we've heard it like in the creationist area, we call it continental sprint as opposed to continental drift. Is that kind of
yeah,
so?
that's
Because
what we're talking about. And we
splitting
have
happened really, yeah, okay.
the hydroplate model believes that there was a reservoir of water underneath the Earth's crust. And this is the difference is one that has water underneath the Earth's crust causing the flood, and the catastrophic plate tectonics is using more of the traditional plate tectonics model with writing on sheets of magma, and
Okay.
so the continents spread apart in both models. If you take a look at the Ark Encounter and go uh, to the Creation Museum, they will show a video of these fountains of the deep erupting and shooting skyward. And I think that in my mind, the two models possibly could actually be talking a little bit about the same type of thing.
What about that? I was gonna ask you about that because it seemed to me both the hydroplate and the plate tectonics seem to have fountains spewing up out of the ground, like virtually creating huge tsunamis as well as geysers. You know, that could be miles high. In fact, one of the ones I remember Walt Brown was the guy proposed years ago, and the water could have actually gone up into the atmosphere in the stratosphere and coming down oftentimes in especially the northern in southern areas, it could have come down as ice precipitation. That's why he had he proposed that for some of the freezing of the mammoths and things of that nature with, up in like the mammoth, a lot of people thought, I remember growing up with the woolly mammoth. Well, they always pictured them in the ice age. Well, they might have been in the ice age, but the reality is the stuff they had in their stomachs was from very temperate climates, buttercups and things like that, the food they had, some of the mammoths. So, they both have then geysers of water uh, shooting up in the skyward, don't they?
Right, and the catastrophic plate tectonics theory, although they believe the continents moved on top of the magma, they propose that all the water for that caused the flood was subterranean.
Well, that's the same as a hydroplate, then, isn't it?
It seems to me that is the case. And so I'm sort of thinking that there may be some truth in both models, and we need to just ferret out a little bit of which model has the best explanation for.
Or Doug, even better yet, maybe there's a synthesis of the two that maybe where they interface, where they could come together, and because maybe one doesn't explain something and the other one, and then
Right.
the other one does, and vice versa. They could. I don't know that, Doug. I'm not as familiar. I mean, I've read some of the stuff, but it is a fascinating idea that these two models. There seems to be there has been some contentions between it, but it's like something you ever Doug where you had two people that are arguing and you realize you guys aren't really disagreeing all that much. You know what I mean? You guys are focusing on you're majoring on the minors rather than the major mechanism of the flood. They both agree that the waters were subterranean. That's the fountains of the deep, and that was the initial source of the flood waters. I mean, they
Right.
both agree on that, right?
Well, they have to, if
Yeah.
otherwise you have to propose that some sort of canopy theory that you have waters being deposited from a water vapor canopy that's surrounding the Earth. Well,
And
I
pretty
was
much
going to say,
they've all rejected that. Pretty much all the creationist literature in modernity doesn't describe that because there were certain. Not that I'm not saying there couldn't be some vapor above us, but there would be enough. That was not enough for it to be the source of the water because if it was thick enough, we'd have roasted to death. From what I understand, the temperature would have gotten too hot. It would have been like, but it would have been like Venus only with water. It would have fried us. The temperatures would have been in the hundreds of degrees if the vapor canopy was thick enough to provide the water for the flood. So most of them, they do agree that the fountains of the deep, in fact, the biblical text says the fountains of the deep were broken up, and then the windows of heaven were open. It's like it's almost like that was a secondary or a secondary cause or secondary reaction to the initial cause of the fountains of the deep breaking up. But anyway, Doug, back to your point about how fast this modern thing we've seen the seafloor spreading. How does that work? Is it stuff like magma actually added on the top of the seafloor? Does that make the water oceans rise a little bit, or what happens there?
Right. If you take a look at the C4 spreading zones, they're going all over the place, and they have,
Yeah.
but you can see where the splits occurred, and you have volcanic activity just pushing magma all over the place. And
Well, the diagram that I think Joe sent this, but the one it seemed like they kind of interlocked together a little bit there. I was looking at the lines, but then the arrows are going both ways from
yeah,
the splits there. Yeah.
so in my mind, that's not a big deal for me. It's the splits happening in one spot and then in another spot, and then you have spreading occurring, not just from one crack. It's from a whole bunch of cracks, and so you have a lot of these cracks all over the globe, and you have then around the Pacific Ocean, you have the Ring of Fire, where you have a lot of volcanic activity, where you're having subduction occurring underneath the continents, and so you have the rise of the Andes mountains, which shows that the movement sort of piled the mountainous areas up on one side of the continent, and you have the same thing in North America where you have the Rocky Mountains, and on the spreading side, you have the uh, Colorado Plateau being bowed up, and you have the Appalachian Mountains, which seem to be happened a little bit first. Now, MacLeod, he then talks about the post-flood effects of where the warm oceans after all the tectonic activity caused a weather event, piling up ice and snow up on the continents from the north, even though the areas at the sea would have still stayed quite temperate. And so we would have had ice ages.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's known as Mr. Ice Age in the creationist circles, but he's a good guy. But he proposed that he's been writing about that for many years now. But yeah, because I think a lot of people when I was a kid, man, I thought the whole planet was covered in ice. Well, that's not the case. But it did. The glaciers went down to southern Indiana. I think it got cold enough for the ice to go down to maybe the southern part of Indiana, but on the coasts and the southern regions, it would have been, yeah, still fairly moderate climate, and also the ability to spread out would have been easier because the land masses well, the oceans were much lower, as I understand it. Is that correct, Doug? Or yeah, yeah,
right. And one of the points I think that one of the proponents of either theory talk about is that this is not the only planet that shows this type of catastrophic resurfacing. Venus shows that quite a bit, and so does Mars. And so they talk about all the water on Mars creating all these different gullies and mountains and everything like that. But it doesn't exist there. But the Venus is a whole lot more hostile environment than Mars is. And
Neither one of them I want to spend much time on, I'll tell you that right now.
no, I'm really skeptical of the whole idea of sending a whole bunch of people to Mars and having them set a colony there. Um, the cost of doing that and the uh, distance of maybe bringing back materials back to the Earth for natural resources, that just doesn't make any sense to me. But
Well, there's an an esoteric goal. The idea that you want to learn something and learn something that you didn't know before. That is a human being's innate desire for us. It's like the old adage, why did you climb to the top of the mountain? Well, because I could. I wanted to try to. That's the human nature. I mean, even God put it into us in some respects. He's go out, be fruitful and multiply, spread out, subdue the earth, the whole idea. But your point is whether we be trying to subdue Mars or Venus or the moon or any place else. That begs that question. But I think that the innate desire of man, fallen or otherwise, is to stretch out and reach out and see what you can discover. And I've always had a theory, Doug, that if God doesn't prevent it by one reason or another, it's probably okay. The example I give Doug is that the Tower of Babel. We built buildings way taller than the Tower of Babel ever was, right?
right.
Okay. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was it was kind of an occult communication tower, I believe, trying to communicate with the gods, the demons, if you will. And this was abhorrent to God, and that's why it was condemned. Because we built buildings taller than the Tower of Babel ever was even hoped to be. Um, and God said it's okay. But how about cloning, Doug? We try to clone a sheep, and she ends up turning out to be a genetic retard. She basically doesn't work very well. There might be restrictions, that God has put on the earth, as well as our ability to explore. But until that happens, we don't really have anybody telling we can't go to Mars. It might appear foolish on the surface, and it might be, but the idea of learning something new, it's kind of exciting in a way, I have to
Yeah.
say. You know?
I want to share my screen. I want to show you something in the Pacific Ocean that's not many people see. So let's take a look
Take a look at that.
at this little ridge that you have with New Zealand, and it extends way up here to Tonga and Fiji, Samoa and Fiji.
Ah,
And it's a ridge right here, and then there's a another ridge over here by New Caledonia and the Solomon Islands. And so, and then you notice that there's a spot here of Papua New Guinea that sort of fits into the bite of Australia here.
hmm.
And so, to me, this really is good evidence that there was a lot of spreading that occurred during the flood. And look at the mess that's in Indonesia and Vietnam and Cambodia up here, where all this volcanic activity just uh, caused that ridge. And then you have the Mariana Trench here and Japan and the ring of fire that goes all the way around uh, the Pacific Ocean. And then I also, in the earlier show, we talked about this ridge here that goes down uh, from Alaska and all the way over to the Hawaiian Islands, and it's an area that had a whole bunch of rapid volcanoes pop up here, and then going along here to it's sort of like it all slowed down, and now you're getting it all piled up in one spot.
Oh yeah.
But you go in a little bit closer, you get all these cracks in the ocean floor, and you just makes you wonder. We can't go back in time and model this. We can just observe what we see, and there's a lot of volcanic activity that took place in this area. And I found it interesting, you have all these different islands that are here by you have Easter Island and you have Pitcairn Island somewhere over here. There it is. Some of the
Yeah,
most remote spots in the world. And yet there's a civilization that got there. Uh, well, Pitcairn Island wasn't inhabited until the mutiny on the Bounty,
yeah,
but
Fletcher Christian. Yep, yep.
Easter Island has a long history of civilization there, where they built all those statues and so
Yeah, Doug, I didn't know it when I first saw this. I thought it was a hoax, but those heads have bodies, and
yeah,
I
they
didn't know
do.
that. Yeah, they have bodies, but they were covered by like volcanic silt or ash or something, or silt or something was flowed down and basically buried the bottom half. So all you saw were the heads. But they've excavated them now, and it turns out that was actually they're really their entire body. How they moved those things is quite how that was done. I don't know. It was pretty amazing. But but yeah, you look at how remote some of those islands are, and that people found their way to them.
Yeah,
That's what I was talking about earlier. The idea of exploring, Doug, it seems to be inherent, innate in humanity to some extent, to see what's out there.
well, this whole idea of the people who inhabited North and South America marched across the Bering Strait. Now, that would have been one way to go, but of course, the sea levels would have been much lower after the flood.
Yeah, 200 to 300 feet lower.
Land bridges, but uh, what about the ability of people building boats? And it was really shown by the Kon-Tiki folks and the other people who built the Polynesian rafts that they were
They can make it.
seafaring people. They knew how to navigate by the stars, and they took their families and they actually established civilizations.
Unbelievable.
And after the flood, there would have been people who had the ability to do that. After all, they were descendants of the people who built the ark.
Yes. Yeah.
So why wouldn't they have the knowledge to build boats to navigate across the Pacific Ocean?
And of course, saying that, Doug, it doesn't take long though for civilization to degenerate and lose some of that memory. That some of that knowledge gets lost 2 or 3 generations down the road, or 50 to 100 years. Suddenly, you lose sight of how you did all that stuff. That some of that gets forgotten. So that's why some of these quote primitive civilizations, they weren't primitive to start with. They're also descended from the same people we're descended from. You know.
So that's pretty amazing. Well, I think that what they discovered in this little event in the South Indian Ocean uh, does tell us that catastrophic plate tectonics could have happened, and or the hydroplate, either one, that would have completely resurfaced the Earth, and what we have is sort of like the stasis and the static results of it, where it doesn't move that as much as it did during that period of time. But we have really no way of saying that it is impossible for that flood to happen.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution. The giraffe that sings. A while ago, a fellow asked us in an email why in the giraffe a nerve descends all the way to the bottom of the neck, then goes up to the other side to the larynx. Isn't that evidence that God is a poor designer? I replied, when you wire a house, do you go around the walls or do you send it the most direct route diagonally across the room? Apparently, you must be a much better designer than God, so I'll give you an experiment. Go into the giraffe and surgically shorten the left recurrent laryngeal nerve. Perhaps then the giraffe would be able to sing. Speculating on how you could design something better than God is arrogant and quite foolish.